It has never been a better time to be an American.
I think actually your efforts on the reflecting pool are actually a great segue. Just like you talked about with the reflecting pool, we didn't do the same old thing the way we'd done it in the past.
Just a reminder of another war you helped to settle, Mr. President.
It's exciting to see your vision.
You're leading us to the greatest economy that the world has ever known, and that's why they tell you to tell me to tell you, Mr. President, thank you, and they love you.
Okay, I need you to take a breath for a second, because I watched that clip 3 times before I started writing this video, and every single time, something about it got more unsettling, not less. That was not a parody. That was not a Saturday Night Live cold open. That was a real cabinet meeting. Those are real senior officials of the United States government, and one of them, with a completely straight face, looked directly at the president and said the words, "You are leading us to the greatest economy the world has ever known." And the room just accepted that. Now here's the thing. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what to think about that politically. That's not what this video is. What I am going to do is show you what was happening in the real world, outside that cabinet room, at the exact same moment those words were being said. Because there's a gap here, and it's not a small one. Stay with me because where this goes is genuinely alarming, and it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. Let's start with a number, 32%. That is the approval rating sitting behind that cabinet table while those officials are telling the president that the nation loves him. 32%. Let that breathe for a moment. We're not talking about a rough news cycle. We're not talking about a temporary dip after a controversial policy. According to the Economist poll taken around this exact moment, this is a record low, not just for this term.
We should tell you that if the Economist YouGov poll out today finds that just 34% of all voters approve of the job Donald Trump is doing as president. Here's what they say about those numbers. Quote, only 1/3 of Americans approve of how Donald Trump is handling his job as president.
For both terms combined. And it goes further than that. This net approval rating of -26 is lower than anything recorded during Joe Biden's presidency. Let me be really clear about what that means. The polling firm is saying that at this specific moment, this administration is less popular than the Biden administration was at its lowest point. And his own cabinet is in a room telling him it's a golden age. So now the question isn't really about the politics. The question is, what exactly is happening inside that room? Is this a performance? Is this genuine? And if it's genuine, what does it mean that the people responsible for advising the most powerful executive in the world are filtering reality before it ever reaches him? Because here's where it gets uncomfortable. If you're a leader and you're getting bad information, you're going to make bad decisions. That's not partisan. That's just how information and power work. A CEO who only hears good news from his board eventually walks his company off a cliff. A general who only gets favorable battlefield reports eventually loses a war he thought he was winning. And a president who sits in a room being told the economy is the greatest in world history, while 63% of Americans say the economy is getting worse. That president is being set up to fail. Now, is that what's happening here? That's the real tension in this video. And the answer is complicated. Let me show you what was happening outside Washington that same week. While cabinet officials were congratulating the president on settling wars and achieving golden ages, a Republican congressman named Mike Flood was standing in front of his own constituents in Nebraska. And it did not go the way the cabinet meeting went.
Protect the pedophiles and Trump's DOJ as they continue to break the law. They were all supposed to be released on December 19th.
Trump Arch, returning the pool, the reflecting pool renovation, slush fund for crooks, and the farm bill. How do we pay for all this? It says how.
That's not a Democratic rally. That's not a protest organized by the opposition. Those are constituents showing up to their own representatives' town hall and demanding answers. About spending, about corruption, about fiscal principles that were supposedly core to the platform they voted for. And notice something. The congressman isn't really answering. He's deflecting. He's pointing back at previous questions. He's buying time, because there's no good answer. When your own voters are asking, how can your morals let you fall in line with this? You're not dealing with a messaging problem anymore. You're dealing with a trust problem. And trust problems don't get fixed with a better press release. This is the contradiction that nobody inside that cabinet room seems willing to say out loud. So why is the cabinet saying it? Why are senior officials performing this level of optimism in front of cameras? Here's a theory, and I think it's the right one. When you're inside a system of power, especially one where loyalty is valued above almost everything else, You learn very quickly what gets rewarded and what doesn't. Bringing bad news is not rewarded. Raising concerns in public is not rewarded. Being the person who says, actually, the polling looks really bad right now, in a televised cabinet meeting is not rewarded. So you don't say it. And what fills that vacuum? Exactly what we saw. Competitive reassurance. Officials trying to outdo each other and expressing enthusiasm and confidence and loyalty, because that's the behavior that gets noticed and appreciated in that room. The problem is that this creates a feedback loop. The more the room performs optimism, the more disconnected the top of the organization becomes from the actual ground-level reality. And the more disconnected leadership becomes, the worse the decisions get. And the worse the decisions get, the angrier the town halls.
I did have to laugh with you, Nicole, at that cabinet meeting. It's like it's so disconnected from reality. Only 13% of Americans think the economy is getting better, and they're telling him it's a golden age. And at some point, is he doing this because he believes his cabinet and he's really that insulated from what's happening out there in the real world? Because they're not doing him service by this disconnection, because what he's doing is deeply unpopular. His war is deeply unpopular. His tariffs are deeply unpopular.
Only 13% of Americans think the economy is getting better, and they're telling him it's a golden age. Say that sentence again slowly. 13%. And a room full of senior officials is calling it a golden age. That's not spin. That's not optimism. That is a complete structural detachment from the experience of ordinary Americans. And here's what makes it politically significant. Voters are not stupid. They can feel when someone doesn't understand their life. And when they feel that, they stop listening. They stop showing up. Or they show up to town halls and start asking questions about slush funds. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough in the political commentary space, because it actually explains how this coalition got here and where it's headed. There was a moment heading into the 2024 election where something real was happening with a specific part of the voter base. Young men, particularly online communities, the so-called manosphere, were genuinely energized. There was a combination of things: the show of strength, the rejection of what they saw as cultural overreach from the left, and crucially, a financial angle. Crypto speculation. The idea that this presidency would be good for their money, their investments, their ability to build something outside the traditional system. That was a genuine political force. It moved real votes. Here's what happened to it. The economy didn't deliver. Crypto got complicated. The vibe of strength started looking more like something else, and the financial aspirations that brought a chunk of that coalition in started feeling less like opportunity and more like being played. One analyst put it plainly: there is no more vibes. And he's right. The particular combination of things that made that block of voters feel like this was their moment, that combination is broken apart. The pieces aren't going to Democrats, but they're not going back enthusiastically either. They're drifting toward anti-establishment positions generally, staying home, or just watching from a distance and making fun of the whole thing online. Now, here's where this gets genuinely serious. When a coalition loses a key energy source, when a segment that was driving enthusiasm and turnout starts to drift, political operations don't just accept the loss. They look for a replacement. And that replacement is where I need you to pay close attention.
Excited because I'm going to need them to do things. I'm going to need to reactivate that part of my coalition and grow it, because I need to replace some energy that I've now lost as a part of the manosphere. And so I think those two stories are actually linked. He's lost that one piece of it, he's replacing it with these extremists. And that's the way that that conversation has been activated.
So the argument being made here by someone who studies this coalition carefully is that what looks like corruption is also calculation. The slush fund, the pardons, the positioning around January 6th, the replatforming of extreme figures. These aren't separate stories. They may be pieces of a single political strategy. If you've lost the kinetic energy of one part of your coalition, you rebuild with a different part. A part that requires a different kind of incentive. And the former head of the Proud Boys is apparently already talking about how excited people in that world are about being able to access these funds. That's the story underneath the story. The cabinet meeting looks like insulation from reality. The polling looks like collapse. The town halls look like political anger. And they are all of those things. But they're also part of a situation where the political calculations are actively shifting, and the direction they're shifting in is not toward the moderate center. It's the opposite. Here's what I want you to sit with before you leave this video. We started with a cabinet room where officials were telling a president with historically low approval ratings that the economy is the greatest the world has ever seen. That moment is almost funny, until you realize what it means structurally. A leader who can't get honest information from the people around him is a leader making decisions in the dark. And decisions made in the dark have consequences that eventually land in the light. At town halls, in polling data, in the grocery prices that 63% of Americans say are still moving in the wrong direction. The gap between that cabinet room and that Nebraska town hall is not just political. It's a gap between two completely different versions of reality. And only one of those versions is being felt by actual people in their actual lives. So here's my question for you, and I genuinely want to know what you think. Is what we saw in that cabinet meeting a failure of the people in the room, or is it a structural inevitability, something that happens to any administration that prioritizes loyalty signals over honest information? Drop your answer in the comments, because this is a conversation worth having, and the answer actually matters for what comes next. If you made it this far, you already know this channel doesn't do hot takes for the sake of clicks. We follow the story where it actually goes. Subscribe if that's what you're here for, and I'll see you in the next one.